how Lindsay Lohan turned chaos into a comeback. At one point in the mid-2000s, Lindsay Lohan was making over $7 million, 0 cents per film, and was the face of a generation. Then, seemingly overnight, her career spiraled into late-night punchlines, mugshots, and canceled contracts. But here's the kicker. Not only did she survive it all, she's now in a full-blown renaissance. In an era where cancel culture and media scrutiny can wipe out careers in a heartbeat, Lindsay's comeback isn't just unexpected, it's downright remarkable. Her story isn't just about fame and fallout, it's about reinvention, accountability, and rising again when the world counts you out. So today we're breaking down the chaotic, controversial, and ultimately courageous journey of Lindsay Lohan, and how she turned total turmoil into a triumphant return. The child star pressure cooker. Lindsay wasn't just any child star, she was the child star of the early 2000s. With movies like The Parent Trap and Freaky Friday, she wasn't just playing roles, she was carrying entire box office hits on her young shoulders. But behind the charm and freckles was a kid growing up way too fast in a business that doesn't exactly come with a user manual for childhood development. The Hollywood grind doesn't allow space for mistakes, and for Lindsay, adolescence came with a side of paparazzi and public scrutiny. The constant need to be on created impossible expectations, blurring the line between her real identity and her public persona. While other teens were navigating acne and prom dates, she was navigating interviews, red carpets, and contracts. It's no surprise that the pressure to perform eventually gave way to burnout. Her early fame laid the groundwork for both her success and her unraveling, and she's been reclaiming it ever since. Tabloid frenzy and media misrepresentation. At the height of her fame, Lindsay Lohan wasn't just featured in tabloids, she practically lived there. Every trip to Starbucks, every party, every stumble out of a nightclub was headline material. Media outlets didn't just report her life, they shaped the public's perception of her entirely. And let's be honest, it became less about who she was and more about how messy she could appear. It was entertainment at her expense. But what's often forgotten is how deeply dehumanizing that kind of coverage can be. Imagine being in your early 20s and the world seems more obsessed with your worst moments than your talent. Over time, Lindsay became the poster child for fallen starlet narratives, legal troubles, and arrests. Few celebrity downfalls have been as publicly documented as Lindsay's run-ins with the law. Between 2007 and 2013, she faced multiple DUI charges, failed court appearances, and rehab stints, all of which were dissected under the harsh glow of public judgment. It was a cycle of chaos, arrests, court hearings, probation violations, repeat. But what made this more than a tabloid story was how normalized it became to treat her struggles as entertainment. Addiction and legal trouble aren't new to Hollywood, but with Lindsay, it often felt like the world was waiting to watch her crash. The real tragedy wasn't just the behavior, it was how little compassion she received during it. Toxic party culture and peer pressure. The early 2000s were a wild time in celebrity culture. Think velour tracksuits, paparazzi mobs, and an unhealthy obsession with who was seen partying with who. Lindsay, unfortunately, was right in the middle of it. Paired up with fellow it girls like Paris Hilton and Britney Spears, she became a nightlife staple, with every stumble out of a club used to write a news story about her supposed downfall. But what often got overlooked was the environment itself. A culture that practically handed young stars the keys to destruction and then criticized them for crashing. Lindsay was barely in her 20s, surrounded by enablers, unchecked freedom, and a media circus that thrived off scandal. Career freefall and Hollywood burnout. There was a point when Lindsay was the most in-demand actress in Hollywood, but by the early 2010s, she was practically unhireable. Studios were wary, directors were frustrated, and insurers wouldn't even approve her for roles. Her reputation for lateness, erratic behavior, and unreliability eclipsed her undeniable talent. The heartbreaking part, she still had it. The screen presence, the timing, the charisma. But Hollywood, as forgiving as it claims to be, has a short memory and a long list of replacements. The fall from leading lady to tabloid punchline wasn't just about personal issues. It was about an industry that doesn't know how to support stars. in crisis, finding peace outside the spotlight. When the American media circus became too much, Lindsay did something few celebrities think to do. She walked away. She moved abroad, lived in London and later Dubai, and embraced a life with a little less chaos. Far from the flashing cameras and relentless headlines, she found space to reset. It's the kind of self-exile that ironically gave her the clarity to start healing. Living away from the Hollywood ecosystem allowed her to separate Lindsay the person from Lindsay the product. She began investing in wellness, entrepreneurship, and projects that mattered to her. It wasn't about running away, it was about reclaiming control. And by removing herself from the constant noise, she was finally able to hear her own voice again, embracing sobriety and mental health. Lindsay has spoken candidly in recent years about her journey towards sobriety and mental health stability. It hasn't been perfect, and she's the first to admit that, but that honesty is exactly what makes her comeback resonate. Sobriety isn't a one-time announcement. It's a lifelong process filled with setbacks, breakthroughs, and daily choices. And for someone who once lived under the microscope, choosing to do that work quietly and consistently is a form of rebellion all its own. She's worked with therapists, embraced structure, and focused on routines that support her healing. Mental health isn't a trend, it's a necessity. And watching Lindsay go from being defined by her lowest moments to defining her own peace is nothing short of inspiring. The Netflix movie and acting return. In 2022, Lindsay made her official comeback to film with Netflix's Falling for Christmas, a rom-com that signaled not just a return to the screen, but a return to joy. It wasn't just about the movie, it was about the message. Lindsay is back, and she's in control. The film itself was classic holiday fluff, but it was her performance that grabbed attention. She was charming, funny, and present, and audiences responded. It became one of Netflix's most watched holiday releases, proving that people weren't just rooting for her comeback, they were ready to embrace it. Hollywood loves a redemption arc, and this time it wasn't forced. It was earned. With more projects lined up, it's clear this wasn't a one-off. It was the foundation for a new era, redefining her legacy. Lindsay Lohan could have easily been remembered as a cautionary tale, but instead she's redefining her legacy. Not as a flawless icon, but as someone who got back up when the world said she couldn't. She's embraced her past without being shackled by it, using her story to remind others that transformation is always possible. Through interviews, her podcasts, and upcoming projects, she's shifting the narrative from chaos to clarity. She's not pretending it was all a phase, she's owning it, lessons and all. And that kind of transparency is more powerful than any perfectly curated comeback. Lindsay is showing the world that redemption isn't just possible, it's powerful. So if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible celebrity transformations, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to turn things around. Because the comeback is always stronger than the setback,